This court has no authority over me. I answer only to constitutional common law.
Sit down, sir. Fake laws end here, and your YouTube education just failed.
The courtroom camera captured the exact moment a man's entire world was about to implode, and he had absolutely no idea it was coming. Marcus Freeman, a 42-year-old self-proclaimed constitutional scholar who had never spent a single day in law school, stood in Judge Judy Sheindlin's courtroom clutching a 3-ring binder filled with printed internet articles about maritime law, gold-fringed flags, and something he called traveling versus driving. What happened in the next 17 minutes would become the most intellectually devastating takedown of pseudo-legal nonsense ever broadcast on television, shared over 40 million times across every social media platform, and turned into mandatory viewing at actual law schools to show students what happens when arrogance meets expertise. But here's what makes this story absolutely insane. Marcus didn't just lose his case. He didn't just get humiliated on national television. What Judge Judy did to expose his 5-year pattern of legal terrorism against innocent small business owners was so thoroughly researched, so perfectly executed, and so brutally satisfying that it triggered criminal investigations in 3 states and bankrupted a man who thought he had discovered loopholes that the entire American legal system somehow missed. The moment that destroyed him came exactly 14 minutes into the trial when Marcus looked directly at Judge Judy, a woman who had presided over 20,000 cases in her career, and said something so breathtakingly arrogant that even the bailiff's expression hardened with disbelief. Before we show you the exact words that cost Marcus Freeman everything he had, you need to understand who these people really were and what brought them to this explosive confrontation. Because this wasn't just about a parking dispute or $12. This was about a calculated predator who weaponized conspiracy theories to extort over $150,000 from hardworking immigrants, and the television judge who finally had enough evidence to end his scam forever. If you've ever dealt with someone who watched a few YouTube videos and suddenly thinks they're smarter than lawyers, judges, and the entire legal system combined, you need to smash that subscribe button right now because what Judge Judy reveals about Marcus's criminal pattern will absolutely shock you. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because by the end of this video you'll understand why this case became legendary and why Marcus Freeman will spend the rest of his life as the most mocked sovereign citizen on the entire internet. Marcus Freeman had been running his scam for 5 years with devastating effectiveness. He discovered the sovereign citizen movement through online forums and YouTube channels, places where people who failed at everything in life convinced each other they had unlocked secret knowledge about the legal system that actual lawyers were too stupid or corrupt to understand. He learned the buzzwords, the fake legal citations, the pseudo-intellectual jargon that could intimidate people who didn't know better. He memorized phrases like appearing specially not generally, gold-fringed flags indicating admiralty jurisdiction, traveling versus driving distinctions, and UCC declarations reserving rights without prejudice. None of it meant anything in actual law, but it sounded impressive to people who didn't understand the legal system, and Marcus had discovered he could weaponize that confusion into cash. His pattern was always the same, calculated and cruel. He would target small businesses owned by immigrants, people living the American dream who had scraped together everything they had to build something from nothing. He chose them specifically because they were vulnerable, because English might be their second language, because they feared the legal system they didn't fully understand, because they couldn't afford prolonged court battles that could destroy everything they had worked for. Marcus would create a situation, manufacture a conflict, then bury them in pseudo-legal paperwork filled with official-sounding nonsense. He filed lawsuits demanding tens of thousands of dollars for constitutional violations that didn't exist, citing legal precedents he misunderstood or invented completely, threatening criminal complaints and federal investigations if they didn't settle immediately. And it worked over and over again because most of his victims were too terrified to fight back. In 5 years, Marcus had filed 47 lawsuits. 11 businesses had settled out of desperation, paying him anywhere from $8,000 to $25,000 just to make the nightmare end. He collected over $150,000 through fear and legal illiteracy, all while never working a legitimate job, never paying child support for his 2 children, never contributing anything positive to society. He lived off the settlements, spent his days in online forums teaching other sovereign citizens his tactics, and genuinely believed he was some kind of freedom fighter exposing government corruption. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. He claimed to reject the legal system's authority over him, but had no problem using that same system to extort money from people who actually respected the law. But Marcus Freeman had finally made a fatal mistake. He had targeted David Park, and David Park refused to be another statistic in his pattern of fraud. David Park was 58 years old, a Korean immigrant who had arrived in America 35 years ago with $200 in his pocket, a limited English vocabulary, and an unshakable belief that hard work would build a better life for his family. He spent 15 years as a valet parking attendant at luxury hotels, working double shifts, saving every possible dollar while raising 3 children with his wife in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment. By the time he turned 40, he had saved enough for a down payment on a small commercial parking lot near a regional hospital, a modest property that charged $3 per hour with a $12 daily maximum. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work that employed 6 people and provided a steady income for his family. David had built his American dream one parking space at a time, following every rule, paying every tax, respecting every law. He never imagined that following the rules would make him a target for someone who had built an entire lifestyle around breaking them. The incident that triggered Marcus Freeman's lawsuit was absurdly simple. Marcus had parked his vehicle at David's lot at 9 in the morning on a Tuesday. The entrance had clear signage in English and Spanish stating the hourly rate and daily maximum. Marcus stayed until 5 in the evening, 8 full hours, which should have cost him the $12 daily maximum. When he approached the exit booth, David's attendant politely informed him of the fee. Marcus refused to pay. Not because he didn't have $12 but because he saw an opportunity. He began filming on his phone, demanding to know under what legal authority the attendant believed he could charge for parking. The confused attendant, a 22-year-old college student working part-time, explained it was private property with posted rates. Marcus launched into a bizarre monologue about traveling versus driving, constitutional rights to free movement, and adhesion contracts being void under common law. The attendant had no idea what any of that meant. He just knew his boss required payment before vehicles could exit. Following standard protocol for non-payment, he placed a boot on Marcus's vehicle. That's when Marcus's performance reached theatrical levels. He called the police claiming his property was being kidnapped, filmed himself declaring he was a free inhabitant of the land not subject to corporate statutes, and announced he would be filing a federal lawsuit for constitutional violations. The police arrived, quickly determined it was a civil parking dispute, told Marcus he needed to pay the $12 or arrange to have his vehicle towed at his own expense, and left. Marcus eventually paid under protest, but not before promising David's terrified attendant that he would regret this violation of sovereign rights. 2 weeks later, David received lawsuit papers demanding $35,000 for false imprisonment of chattel, emotional distress, and deprivation of rights under color of law. The legal language looked official enough to be terrifying, filled with citations and references that seemed legitimate to someone without legal training. David's first instinct was to settle. His lawyer explained that fighting the lawsuit could cost $15,000 to $20,000 in legal fees with no guarantee of winning, while settling for $5,000 or $10,000 would make the problem disappear. David seriously considered it. He couldn't afford to lose his business over a crazy person's fake lawsuit. But something about the situation felt fundamentally wrong to him. He had followed every rule. His business was legitimate. His signs were clear. Marcus had used his property for 8 hours and refused to pay $12, yet somehow David was being sued for $35,000. It violated every principle of fairness David believed America stood for. His wife begged him to settle, terrified they would lose everything. His children worried about their college funds being consumed by legal fees. But David made a decision that would change everything. He refused to be another victim in Marcus Freeman's pattern of fraud. David's lawyer began investigating Marcus's history and discovered something extraordinary. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern, a business model, a calculated scam that Marcus had been running for years. The lawyer found 16 other lawsuits Marcus had filed using nearly identical language, all against small business owners, all settled quietly out of court. He found online forum posts where Marcus bragged about his tactics and coached others on how to create situations that could be turned into lawsuits. He found evidence that Marcus had no actual legal training but presented himself online as a constitutional expert. Most damning of all, he found that every single lawsuit Marcus had filed that actually went to trial had been dismissed, often with sanctions against Marcus for filing frivolous claims. Armed with this information, David's lawyer did something unusual. He requested the case be heard on Judge Judy's television program, knowing that the format would allow them to present their evidence quickly and that Judge Judy's experience would see through Marcus's pseudo-legal nonsense immediately. Marcus Freeman agreed to appear on the show, which revealed everything you needed to know about his delusional confidence. He genuinely believed his sovereign citizen theories would work. He thought he could out-debate Judge Judy using his binder full of internet printouts. He was about to learn a lesson that would cost him everything. The moment Marcus Freeman walked into Judge Judy's courtroom, everyone watching could sense something extraordinary was about to happen. He entered carrying his massive three-ring binder like it was sacred text, wearing a wrinkled suit with an oversized American flag pin on his lapel, his unkempt beard and condescending smirk suggesting he believed he was the smartest person in the room. He didn't sit down immediately at the plaintiff's table. Instead, he stood there arranging his materials, pulling out laminated cards and colored folders, creating an elaborate display that looked more like a conspiracy theorist's vision board than legal preparation. David Park entered quietly behind him, carrying a single manila folder with organized receipts and security camera timestamps, his simple button-down shirt and tired eyes telling the story of a man who worked honest 16-hour days and just wanted this nightmare to end. The contrast was immediate and powerful. One man had complexity and performance. The other had simplicity and truth. Judge Judy entered and took her position at the bench, her sharp eyes immediately scanning Marcus's theatrical setup with the kind of experienced skepticism that comes from seeing every variety of courtroom nonsense over 25 years. She opened the case file and began with her signature directness. "Mr. Freeman, you're suing Mr. Park for $35,000 over a parking dispute. Explain your claim." Marcus stood up without being asked to speak, which was his first mistake. "Your Honor, before I answer, I need to establish for the record that I'm appearing specially, not generally, and I do not consent to this court's presumed jurisdiction over me as a living man. I reserve all rights without prejudice under UCC 1-308. Judge Judy's pen stopped moving. She looked up slowly, that dangerous calm settling over her expression that regular viewers recognized as the moment before devastation. "Mr. Freeman, sit down and answer my question. Did you park your car at Mr. Park's parking lot?" Marcus remained standing, opening his binder with performative authority. "Your Honor, I need to clarify fundamental jurisdictional issues first. According to Title 18 U.S.C. Section 241, when a flag with gold fringe is displayed in a courtroom, it indicates this is operating under admiralty or maritime law, not constitutional law. I do not recognize maritime authority over a land-based free inhabitant." Judge Judy's eyebrow arched in that expression that had become a meme across the internet. "Mr. Freeman, that flag has hung in American courtrooms since 1895. It's decorative. It means absolutely nothing. Now sit down and answer my question. Did you park at Mr. Park's lot?" Marcus's confidence didn't waver. He genuinely believed he was winning this exchange. "I was traveling in my private conveyance, not driving a motor vehicle subject to state regulation. The distinction is crucial under constitutional law. Driving is a commercial activity requiring licensure. Traveling is a constitutionally protected right that cannot be regulated or taxed. Therefore, I was not engaged in an activity subject to Mr. Park's corporate codes." The audience exchanged confused glances. David Park looked utterly bewildered, having no idea what any of these words meant or how they related to someone refusing to pay $12 for parking. Judge Judy closed her eyes briefly, that signature gesture of losing patience that viewers had seen 1,000 times. "Mr. Freeman, I've been a judge for 25 years. I've heard every excuse, every scam, every delusional theory. But you're going to explain to me in plain English why you think you don't have to pay $12 for leaving your car, your private conveyance in someone else's parking lot for 8 hours. Marcus took this as an invitation to lecture. He flipped through his binder, pulling out printed articles. "Your Honor, I've researched this extensively. According to Black's Law Dictionary 4th edition, driving is defined as operating a vehicle for commercial purposes. I was engaged in private travel, not commerce. Mr. Park's posted signs constitute an adhesion contract, which is void ab initio under common law. I did not knowingly, willingly, and intentionally enter into contract with his corporate entity. Therefore, no legal obligation exists. Before we show you the exact moment Marcus's pseudo-legal fantasy collapsed into complete humiliation, I need you to do something. Hit that like button right now if you're ready to see Judge Judy intellectually destroy 5 years of internet-based legal education in under 60 seconds. Subscribe to this channel because what happens next proves that watching YouTube videos about constitutional law doesn't make you a lawyer, it makes you a cautionary tale. Comment just one word, dismissed, if you think Marcus is about to learn the hardest lesson of his entire life. Trust me, the destruction that's coming is so thorough, so perfectly executed, that legal professionals will use this clip for years to teach students what not to do in court. Judge Judy turned to David Park, her tone completely different, almost gentle. "Mr. Park, tell me what happened." David spoke simply, his slight accent making his words even more genuine. "Your Honor, Mr. Freeman parked at 9 in the morning. Sign at entrance says $3 per hour, $12 maximum per day. He stayed 8 hours. Should be $12 total. He refused to pay, argued with my employee for 45 minutes. My employee followed policy, put boot on car until payment. Mr. Freeman filmed everything, yelled about kidnapping and constitutional violations. Then he sued me for $35,000. I don't understand what I did wrong. I just have parking lot. I follow all laws. I pay all taxes. He used my property for 8 hours and won't pay $12, but I'm the criminal?" Judge Judy turned back to Marcus with an expression that made everyone in the courtroom lean forward in anticipation. "Mr. Freeman, did Mr. Park own the property where you parked your vehicle?" Marcus sensed a trap but couldn't resist answering. According to state corporate records, the legal fiction known as David Park claims ownership, but under constitutional common law, all land belongs to the people collectively. No individual can claim absolute dominion over territory that existed before government incorporation. Judge Judy's patience snapped like a brittle wire. "So that's a yes. He owns it. You parked on his private property. He has posted rates that are clearly visible. You stayed 8 hours. You refused to pay $12. And now you're suing him for $35,000 because you think you discovered a loophole that every lawyer, judge, and legal scholar in American history somehow missed. Is that correct?" Marcus made his fatal mistake. He let his arrogance override whatever survival instinct he might have possessed. "Your Honor, with all due respect, you seem confused about the difference between statutory law and constitutional common law. Perhaps if you had studied constitutional frameworks as extensively as I have instead of just enforcing corporate policy, you would understand these fundamental distinctions. I don't mean to be condescending, but I'm probably more qualified to sit on that bench than you are, considering I actually understand constitutional principles rather than just memorizing bar association statutes." The silence that followed was nuclear. The bailiff's mouth fell open. David Park's eyes went wide with horror. The audience froze. Judge Judy didn't move for 3 full seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice dropped to that deadly quiet level that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. "You think you're more qualified than me?" Judge Judy stood up from her bench, a rare power move that sent a physical shock through the courtroom. "Let me educate you, Mr. Freeman, since you clearly need it. I graduated from American University. I earned my law degree from New York Law School. I passed the New York State Bar examination in 1965. I served as a prosecutor in family court for 14 years. I was appointed as a judge in 1982. I presided over 20,000 actual cases before ever stepping into this television courtroom. That's 25 years of real legal practice. Now let me tell you about your qualifications. You have no law degree. You have no legal training. You have no bar membership. What you have is an internet connection and delusions of adequacy." Judge Judy pulled out her own folder, thick with documentation. "I did my homework on you, Mr. Freeman. You've filed 47 frivolous lawsuits in 5 years. Every single one dismissed. You sued a grocery store claiming illegal taxation on sales tax. Dismissed. You sued your landlord claiming unlawful contracts under admiralty law. Dismissed. You sued a traffic court for constitutional violations. Dismissed, and you were fined $5,000 for vexatious litigation that you still haven't paid. You haven't paid child support in 4 years either. You claim constitutional sovereignty gives you the right to ignore court orders, but you still expect to use actual courts when you want money from hardworking people like Mr. Park. That's not sovereignty, Mr. Freeman. That's parasitic hypocrisy." Marcus's face had gone pale, sweat forming on his forehead. Your Honor, those cases were different. The system is rigged against people who understand the truth. Judge Judy cut him off with surgical precision. Let's destroy your legal theories one by one. This gold-fringed flag nonsense means nothing. Admiralty law applies to maritime commerce, not parking lots in Kansas. The UCC you keep citing is commercial code for business transactions. It has nothing to do with opting out of laws. Your traveling versus driving argument has been rejected by the Supreme Court 15 times. You don't get to use public roads without following public laws. That's not tyranny. That's civilization. And here's what disgusts me most. You target immigrants like Mr. Park who built businesses from nothing. You terrorize them with legal threats. You make them spend thousands defending against your garbage. You haven't worked a legitimate job in 5 years. You're not a patriot or a scholar. You're an unemployed con artist who watched YouTube videos that made you feel intelligent. Your lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. You're sanctioned $5,000 for Mr. Park's legal fees. I'm referring you to the state bar for unauthorized practice of law. Get out of my courtroom. The gavel strike echoed through the courtroom like a thunderclap of finality, and Marcus Freeman's entire world shattered in that single moment. He sat frozen, his face drained of color, staring at the table as his precious binder lay scattered on the floor, pages of worthless internet propaganda spilling across the courtroom tile like the ruins of a collapsed empire. David Park broke down in tears, not from sadness but from overwhelming relief, the kind of emotional release that comes when months of terror and uncertainty finally end with validation. He turned to Judge Judy with trembling hands pressed together in gratitude. Thank you, Your Honor. You saved my business. You saved my family. You showed me that America still has justice for people like me. Judge Judy's expression softened in a way rarely seen on her show. Mr. Park, you did nothing wrong. Don't ever let people like him make you question your integrity. You built something honorable through honest work. That's worth more than all his fake legal theories combined. The bailiff escorted Marcus out of the courtroom as he muttered incoherently about appeals to the Supreme Court and constitutional violations, still clinging to his delusions even in complete defeat. Nobody was listening anymore. His moment of perceived intellectual superiority had transformed into eternal humiliation, and the cameras had captured every second of his destruction. Within 1 hour of the episode airing, the clip titled "Sovereign Citizen Gets Absolutely Destroyed by Judge Judy" hit 500,000 views. Within 3 hours it crossed 2 million. By the end of the first day, over 15 million people had watched Marcus Freeman's complete annihilation across YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. The numbers kept climbing, eventually surpassing 40 million views as the video spread across every corner of the internet. The memes arrived instantly and mercilessly. Screenshots of Marcus's confident smirk fading into shocked horror became captioned with "I'm more qualified than you," followed by images of his devastated face. The moment Judge Judy stood up from her bench became a power move GIF shared millions of times. Gold-fringed flag jokes flooded social media. The phrase "private conveyance" became internet shorthand for ridiculous excuses. Anti-sovereign citizen communities shared the video as the definitive example of what happens when pseudo-legal theories meet actual legal expertise. Law professors assigned it as required viewing in their classes about vexatious litigation and the Dunning-Kruger effect. Bar associations used it in continuing education seminars about dealing with sovereign citizen litigants. Marcus Freeman became the most mocked person in sovereign citizen history, which was saying something in a movement built entirely on public humiliation. The real-world consequences for Marcus were swift and merciless. The state bar investigation resulted in a permanent cease and desist order prohibiting him from filing any lawsuit without attorney representation. His outstanding child support enforcement accelerated, resulting in wage garnishment that would have mattered if he had any wages to garnish. His total unpaid legal judgments now exceeded $65,000. The 11 businesses he had previously extorted into settlements began filing countersuits demanding return of their money plus damages, having finally discovered they had been scammed by someone with zero legal authority. Marcus's already non-existent job prospects vanished completely as his face became synonymous with legal incompetence. Even his family publicly distanced themselves, with his ex-wife using the courtroom footage in custody proceedings to demonstrate his inability to make rational decisions. David Park's life transformed in the opposite direction. His parking lot business saw a surge of support from people who watched the episode and wanted to help the humble immigrant who stood up to a bully. Local news covered his story as an example of the American dream surviving against those who try to exploit it. He became a voice in the small business community, speaking about the importance of fighting back against fraudulent legal threats. Most importantly, he could finally sleep at night knowing that doing the right thing, following the law, and trusting the system had been vindicated. If this story of the most satisfying sovereign citizen destruction ever captured on camera restored your faith that expertise matters and arrogance has consequences, smash that like button so hard your screen cracks. Comment dismissed if you think Marcus got exactly what he deserved for thinking YouTube University grants law degrees. Subscribe and hit that notification bell because we're bringing you more cases where entitled people learn that fake knowledge is no match for real experience. Share this with anyone who needs to see what happens when conspiracy theories collide with actual courtrooms. Remember, you can't Google your way into being smarter than people who spent decades mastering their profession, and if you try, you'll end up exactly like Marcus Freeman, broke, humiliated, and viral for all the wrong reasons.